neighborhood outside Bend, Oregon, lived Daniel Brooks, a cybersecurity analyst who worked as a private contractor for federal investigations. Daniel specialized in tracking illegal financial networks, and his work often brushed against powerful people. But at home, he lived a simple life. Just him and his dog Max, a Belgian Malinois retired from a canine search and rescue unit. Max was disciplined, intelligent, and deeply bonded to Daniel. Every morning they followed the same routine, a jog through the pine-lined trails, breakfast, then Daniel disappeared into his home office while Max guarded the door like a silent sentinel. One evening, Daniel received an encrypted email with no sender ID. "You've crossed a line. Walk away." Daniel stared at the screen, uneasy. Max sensed the tension and stood up, ears sharp, eyes locked on Daniel. For the first time in years, Daniel left the house without Max, telling himself it was just a short meeting. Daniel never came back. The next morning, police discovered Daniel's SUV wrecked at the edge of a forest road. Authorities ruled it a fatal accident caused by speeding and fatigue. No autopsy was pushed for. No investigation followed. Max was taken to the crash site. The moment he stepped out of the patrol car, he pulled violently toward the woods, barking and whining, refusing to calm down. Officers dismissed it as animal distress. Days later, Daniel's home was sealed. Max was transferred to a county animal shelter. But every night he escaped, returning to Daniel's front porch, lying there until sunrise. 3 months later, Lucas Brooks, Daniel's adult son, arrived from Seattle. Lucas worked as an investigative podcast producer and hadn't spoken to his father in years. He came only to settle the estate. As Lucas unlocked the door, Max appeared from across the street. The dog stopped, stared at him, and slowly approached. After a long sniff, Max sat down quietly at Lucas's feet. Something about that moment felt deliberate. Inside the house, Max followed Lucas closely. He scratched at a locked filing cabinet, barked at a framed photo of Daniel standing beside a wealthy shipping executive named Gregory Vaughn, and growled when Lucas tried to leave the room. Lucas ignored it until he noticed something chilling. Max wasn't acting confused, he was acting focused, as if he was waiting for the right person to arrive. What did Max witness the night Daniel died, and why did he recognize Lucas as the key to uncovering it? Lucas believed in facts, not feelings, but Max didn't rely on logic, he relied on memory. Each day, Max led Lucas to places Daniel used to visit. One afternoon, Max dragged him toward a drainage culvert near the crash site. Inside, wrapped in plastic and dirt, was Daniel's cracked burner phone. Lucas's hands trembled. A data recovery specialist salvaged fragments, audio clips, call logs, and one partially corrupted voice recording. Daniel's voice was clear. The other voice belonged to Gregory Vaughn. "You don't get to walk away after what you found," Vaughn said. The recording ended abruptly. Lucas took the evidence to local police. They refused to reopen the case. Vaughn was a major donor, deeply connected to port authorities and politicians. That night, someone broke into Daniel's house. Nothing was stolen except Daniel's encrypted hard drive. Max chased the intruder out but suffered a stab wound in the process. At the emergency vet clinic, Lucas sat beside Max and finally understood the truth. Max wasn't just loyal, he was a witness. If a dog could remember a murder, how long would those responsible allow him to live? Lucas received a call from a blocked number. "Drop the story, or the dog doesn't make it." Instead of backing down, Lucas went public. Using the GPS history from Max's old canine collar, Lucas traced his location to an abandoned shipping terminal owned by Vaughn's subsidiary company. When police arrived, Max broke free and ran straight to a concrete pier, barking uncontrollably. Forensic teams dug beneath the structure. They found Daniel's blood, preserved in soil Vaughn's cleanup crew had missed. The accident narrative collapsed. Max was brought into a controlled behavioral identification test. When Vaughn entered the room, Max stiffened, growled, and sat, the exact alert posture he'd been trained to use when identifying a threat. Vaughn panicked. But powerful men don't surrender easily, and Vaughn still had one final move. Lucas received a call from blocked number. Drop the story or the dog doesn't make it. Instead of backing down, Lucas went public. Using the GPS history from Max's old canine collar, Lucas traced his location to an abandoned shipping terminal owned by Vaughn's subsidiary company. When police arrived, Max broke free and ran straight to a concrete pier, barking uncontrollably. Forensic teams dug beneath the structure. They found Daniel's blood, preserved in soil Vaughn's cleanup crew had missed. The accident narrative collapsed. Max was brought into a controlled behavioral identification test. When Vaughn entered the room, Max stiffened, growled, and sat, the exact alert posture he'd been trained to use when identifying a threat. Vaughn panicked, but powerful men don't surrender easily, and Vaughn still had one final move. Lucas sat alone in his father's old home office long after midnight. Max lay near the door, resting but alert, his ears twitching at every distant sound. The room felt heavier than before, not with grief, but with unfinished business. On Daniel's restored laptop, one encrypted folder remained unopened. It wasn't labeled with a name or case number, just a date, 3 days before Daniel's death. Lucas hesitated, then entered the password he'd discovered earlier, Max's original canine badge number. The folder opened. Inside were documents, voice logs, and surveillance summaries far beyond Gregory Vaughn. Daniel hadn't been investigating one man, he had uncovered a network. Shipping executives, port security officials, a federal customs supervisor, all connected through shell companies and offshore accounts. At the center of it all was a new name Lucas didn't recognize at first. Michael Rowan, Deputy Director of Regional Port Authority. Lucas froze. Rowan was the same official who had quietly pushed for Daniel's death to be classified as an accident. Max stood up. The dog moved closer to the desk, staring at the screen, then growled softly. Not aggressive, alert, the same reaction he'd shown before every major discovery. Daniel's final voice memo played automatically. "If anything happens to me," Daniel said calmly, "they'll stop at nothing to bury this. The dog knows more than they think. Trust him." Lucas swallowed hard. Before he could process more, headlights flashed through the window. Max barked once, sharp and loud. A black SUV idled outside. Lucas shut the laptop and grabbed his phone, dialing emergency services. The vehicle sped away before officers arrived, but the message was clear. Someone knew the file had been opened. The next morning, Lucas contacted a federal investigative journalist he trusted. Together, they coordinated a controlled data release, not all at once, but in stages. Every document was backed up and time-stamped. Max accompanied Lucas everywhere. During one press briefing, Michael Rowan appeared unexpectedly, claiming innocence and calling the evidence misinterpreted. As Rowan stepped closer to Lucas, Max broke formation, standing directly between them. He growled. Cameras caught everything. Security intervened, but the damage was done. Public attention exploded. Federal agents launched a broader probe. That night, Lucas returned home exhausted. Max sat beside him, steady and calm. Lucas finally understood. Max wasn't protecting the truth anymore. He was protecting him. As sirens echoed faintly in the distance, Lucas opened a new message on his phone. An anonymous text. "You've only exposed the surface." Lucas looked at Max and realized the fight wasn't over. If Daniel's investigation reached higher than anyone imagined, how many more powerful enemies were now watching, and how long before they struck back? The investigation moved faster than Lucas expected, and more violently than he feared. Within days of the staged data release, federal subpoenas were issued. Port authority offices were raided. Bank accounts tied to shell corporations were frozen. News channels labeled it the largest corruption inquiry in the state's history. But power doesn't collapse quietly. Lucas noticed the signs first. An unfamiliar sedan parked across the street for hours, a drone hovering briefly over his backyard, anonymous emails warning him to stop before people get hurt. Max noticed more. On their evening walks, Max repeatedly stopped, scanning intersections, sniffing tire tracks, pulling Lucas off sidewalks seconds before vehicles sped past. His instincts were no longer investigative, they were defensive. One night, as Lucas recorded a podcast update from a secure location in downtown Portland, the building's fire alarm suddenly went off. People rushed for the exits. Max refused to move. Instead, he growled and forced Lucas back into the stairwell. Seconds later, a gunshot echoed in the lobby. Security footage later showed a man with a suppressed weapon blending into the crowd. Max had smelled him. Federal agents moved Lucas and Max into temporary protective custody. They were relocated to a remote safe house near the Cascade foothills. No press, no internet, no updates. For the first time, Lucas felt truly isolated. Late one night, Max woke him with low, urgent whining. Headlights flickered through the trees. Multiple vehicles approached, unmarked. The agents guarding the property prepared to evacuate, but before they could act, gunfire erupted. Chaos followed. Max broke from cover, drawing attention away from Lucas. He charged toward the tree line, barking wildly. Lucas screamed his name. Minutes later, silence. When authorities finally secured the area, Max was gone. Only blood on the ground. Lucas collapsed. For hours, search teams combed the forest. At dawn, they found Max near a ravine, injured, exhausted, but alive. He had led the attackers away and doubled back, just like he'd been trained to do years ago. The attackers were later identified as private contractors linked to one of the offshore companies Daniel had flagged. The message was unmistakable. This wasn't about silencing a journalist anymore. It was about erasing witnesses. As Max recovered, Lucas received confirmation that Michael Rowan had fled the country hours before arrest warrants were issued. Lucas stared at the report, fury and resolve mixing in his chest. Max rested his head on Lucas's knee, eyes steady. The truth was wounded, but it wasn't dead. And now, it was personal. With the main suspect on the run and the danger escalating, would Lucas risk everything to bring Rowan back, even if it meant stepping directly into the lion's den? Michael Rowan didn't vanish by accident. Within 48 hours of fleeing the country, his digital footprint resurfaced, faint but traceable. A private charter logged in Vancouver, Canada, then disappeared over the Pacific before reappearing in Guayaquil, Ecuador. It was the kind of route used by men who knew extradition laws better than passports. Lucas studied the flight data inside a federal task force briefing room. He wasn't supposed to be there, but Daniel's files had made him indispensable. Every shell company, every ghost account, every hidden transaction had passed through Rowan's approval at some point. This wasn't corruption, it was orchestration. Against protocol, Lucas insisted on traveling with the team as a civilian consultant. The agents hesitated until Max stepped forward, calm and ready, his presence a reminder that this case had never followed standard rules. In Ecuador, the heat was suffocating. Rowan had taken refuge in a private coastal compound protected by hired security and layers of legal insulation. Surveillance suggested he was preparing to flee again, this time permanently. During a nighttime perimeter sweep, Max suddenly stopped. He sniffed the air, growled, then bolted toward a drainage corridor beneath the compound wall. Agents followed, discovering a hidden escape tunnel, freshly used. Rowan was already moving. The chase pushed into the jungle outskirts. Rain turned the ground slick, visibility dropped. One by one, agents lost sight of the target until Max's barking cut through the storm. They found Rowan trapped at the edge of a ravine. Desperate, Rowan pulled a gun. Max lunged. The shot went wide. Rowan fell backward, caught just in time by agents. As he was restrained, Rowan stared at Max, shaking. "It was just a dog," he whispered. Lucas stepped forward. "No," he said. "You underestimated loyalty." Rowan was extradited under emergency charges tied to international financial crimes and homicide conspiracy. The story broke globally within hours. Back in the US, preparations for trial began. Media pressure mounted. Powerful figures lawyered up. Some disappeared. Lucas returned home with Max, exhausted but alive. One evening, as Lucas reviewed pre-trial evidence, Max reacted sharply to a new name appearing in a witness list. Another official, higher rank, higher clearance. Lucas leaned back, realizing the truth Daniel had uncovered wasn't stopping with Rowan. Rowan hadn't been the top. He'd been the runner. If Rowan answered to someone even more powerful, would exposing them finally end the conspiracy or trigger consequences no one could control?